Hey everyone, you're watching DeFi Talks with DeFi Dad. Oh, there we go. My video got delayed there. Hey everyone. By the way, I'm just quickly rechecking my mic because it looked like it dropped off. We're all good. Hey, thanks for joining us. It is Tuesday, May 10th, 2022. Today we're going to talk all about a very new topic. I would classify it as like a new vertical or niche within the Web3 space called Decentralized Science. And I'm thankfully joined here by Laurence, Ion, and Vincent Weisser from VitaDAO, who are both founding stewards. It's interesting because my background actually is in chemistry, and once upon a time I was in a chemistry PhD program. So I'm very familiar with how challenging it is to get your research funded in the world of science. And so what VitaDAO is doing really stuck out to me because they're a bit like a venture DAO, but they focus on longevity research. And so I'm going to let Laurence and Vincent tell their story today around VitaDAO, but I do want to more generally help others to learn about what is DeSci, SCI, short for Decentralized Science. So guys, thanks for joining me. Welcome. How are you doing?
Great. Yeah, great to be on, like big long-time fan of the podcast. So yeah, amazing to chat.
This could be
awesome
DeFi Dad in the future here. If I might have to do a rebrand.
Hopefully.
Yeah, sorry, Vincent. You were just saying, yeah, dude, welcome. And actually, either one of you could lead off with this. I'd like to just get a little bit more about your background. I think you know it's always a common starting point for anyone in the crypto or Web3 space.
Yeah, so like maybe my kind of brief story is that I was like always kind of like really interested in Ethereum ecosystem really since like the DAO. Like I put my first ETH in the DAO and was really excited by the idea of the DAO, which got me into crypto and Ethereum, and actually kind of like studied product and design and with my friend did a decentralized Ethereum exchange actually in 2017 called DexBlue, and kind of at the same time really got pulled into it, like more out of like curiosity and excitement into longevity. Actually, I think Vitalik actually really like supporting it and writing about it, like got me more into it. So while I was working on this decentralized exchange, I actually went to like a longevity research conference in my hometown in Berlin, and actually like the first guy I bumped into was Vitalik. So really was crazy coincidence kind of to see already like the fields intersect, but then really kind of like spend most of my time in actually DeFi and crypto, but was always wanted to do something in the DAO space, and then got really kind of like met Paul and Tyler that built a Molecule more like as this platform to fund research with crypto, and joined them to kind of like co-initiate VitaDAO when they like had this early idea, as well as like the platform and kind of like DeFi primitives, if you like, with an IP NFT to fund research. So that's how I like got involved with VitaDAO and kind of like on all different facets of it, from like the product tokenomics side to like launching initiatives with Gitcoin and other things that we can talk about later. But yeah.
Awesome stuff. Vincent, what's your background? How did you ever get into crypto or ultimately into VitaDAO?
Totally. Like early on.
Oh, like, I'm sorry. Did I just? I meant to say Laurence. Did I say? Did I just say Vincent? Yeah, I'm a little rusty today. My mic wasn't working. Got home a little late from the dentist. Anyways, yeah. How about let's have Laurence. Curious, what is your background getting into Web3?
Well, my background, actually, I'm a self-taught computer scientist and self-taught molecular biologist, if you can call, but yeah, no formal training. I just love I'm just very curious about how biology works, probably also because I've spent a lot of time in hospitals and when I was a kid from like age 6 to I think 18. I have this rare genetic disorder of the bone, and but I went into technology as I saw the biggest potential for impact, the highest leverage way to solve problems. Initially as a programmer, but then I realized I need to be an entrepreneur to actually build things people want. But now I'm more of a longevity advocate, this new way of tackling age-related disease and just new approach to medicine. I'm also an investor. And even though most of my career has been tech startups, but because I was in tech, I just heard about Bitcoin. I think I was in first year of college, like 2012 or 13. I just liked the name. You could mine it on your laptop, just exchange it with friends. But when the first cycle, I think it went to 1,000, I thought it's crazy. So I kind of focused on tech startups, and then I heard about it, Ethereum, cool, you can actually build stuff on it, went to hackathons, even won a hackathon with my business partner, Alex. And then, yeah, got in, got out, and so on. And then finally, I think I was at Burning Man and discussing with people to start a longevity DAO because I was getting more into longevity. Because I noticed that not only do we have maybe short to medium term benefits, not only are 110,000 people dying every day of aging and millions more suffering, of course, hundreds of millions that are suffering in the last years with grave implications to society, especially as we have an aging population and most of the kids are in the developing countries. But also, I think because I'm just super excited to see the future, and I want intelligence augmentation, brain machine interfaces, AI safety, all of those things I went deep into, but then I realized I might not make it to see that future happen. Exciting, good or bad, who knows? Hopefully working towards making it be good. So that's why I think keeping us healthier for longer in a preventative way by tackling aging itself, the root cause of most of these chronic diseases. That's why I'm fully dedicated to this mission.
So I think one puzzle piece to understanding like what VitaDAO is working on and what Decentralized Science is, you have to understand how grants work, or just in general how research is funded. Either one of you want to jump into that and talk a bit about like the legacy world of how this works, and also too, I'd like to blend that with venture capital.
Totally.
There's obviously there's a quite a bit of money that has been allocated in the past, but yeah, Vincent, go right ahead.
Yeah, I think the interesting bit is, of course, that there is like a lot of like biomedical research funding happening at kind of the state level. So kind of like in the US, it's like the National Institute of Health that I think, like, I don't know the rough number, exact numbers, but I think on the order of like 30 to 50 billion a year in like biomedical science funding that they are basically giving to like universities and academic institutions. And the interesting thing is, I think to the one point that Laurence raised is ultimately that longevity and treating and researching like the root cause of most diseases, most like age-related diseases, is not the main funding like target, or like most of the funding goes to Alzheimer's or cancer, etc., but more as the symptoms, so instead of like at the root cause of preventing cancer or Alzheimer's in the first place. So I think it's like this, like the paradigm is really not on treating the root causes of age-related disease. But I think another really important thing to understand is ultimately that the NIH is like I think also falls under like a lot of the cliches of like a gigantic government funding body, that it's a bit bureaucratic, it's fairly slow, it's fairly like conservative, and not like, there's an extremely recent good read for people that are curious by an organization called newscience.org /NIH is a report basically on why the NIH as a funding body is incredibly broken, mostly funds very old researchers, tenured professors with like more like incremental research versus like the breakthrough research in biomedical sciences. And I think then the course also to understand that it's one of the main and also only funding sources for a lot of people. So there is not that many alternatives to it, and kind of like venture-backed biotechs and like big pharma is kind of like downstream. So it's like basically taking some of that research and trying to develop it into therapeutics that actually reach humans. But it basically, big pharma and also biotech is not really engaged in the earliest stages of like basic research or even early stage biomedical research. And the universities are not really optimizing for treating diseases. It's like the goal of a researcher or professor is not necessarily to lead to successful therapies. So it's like, I think a lot of these misalignments would like often called kind of like the valley of death between initial funding and actually never reaching humans with like those research efforts. So I think this is one interesting thing, but I think on the high level, which is fascinating, I think with longevity, is that it's like a fundamentally different viewpoint on how to treat disease and aging at the root cause. And I think the fascinating thing is like this gigantic overlap in crypto of people like Vitalik, recently Brian Armstrong from Coinbase, Balaji, and a bunch of others, Juan Benet from IPFS and Filecoin, Jed McCaleb from Ripple and Stellar, all getting behind this cause and becoming, over the last even like 12 months, the biggest private funders of the sector, which I think is like a fascinating trend. And Balaji made this a really good tweet storm a while ago, basically saying like longevity has the potential to be to traditional medicine what crypto is traditional finance. It changes the terms of the debate and then goes into detail why basically what they share in common, like how basically longevity ultimately is like a similar radical rethink of like what medicine should be or could be as DeFi is to centralized finance. So I think that's like an interesting, like kind of like also similarity between the two fields, which is fascinating to me. But yeah, like the TLDR is kind of, we need more diverse funding sources. Like the state will go on funding research,
Yes.
but it's good to have alternatives that are way quicker, way less bureaucratic, way more risk-taking and ambitious, funding younger researchers, for example, as well. Yeah, so I think that's maybe the TLDR.
Yeah. I like I don't have any like flashy stats to fire off, but I am aware the fiscal year 2022 budget for the NIH in the United States is 45 billion, and so the NIH has traditionally been this major source of funding for research. And if we like break it down even like further and like dumb this down, so when I worked in an inorganic chemistry lab, our goal as as a PhD student, or no matter what your position was, but at the time I was a PhD student, and so our goal, of course, was to publish papers of like new and interesting research. But I mean, truthfully, the professors that worked within our chemistry department, and which was like really at the time UC San Diego, I don't know, I think was like still roughly top 10, but kind of sits within that upper echelon with the likes of like a Berkeley and MIT and so on. At the end of the day, you're incentivized to do research on what will get funded. So there are brilliant people who are doing this, sort of like cutting edge research on all sorts of different topics. I mean, our research was related to trying to turn methanol back into a precursor for fuel. So, I mean, the idea, there's all sorts of like interesting renewable energy research. And then in this case, obviously, we're talking with VitaDAO specifically about longevity research. So more related to someone's health. And so, I mean, I think safely assume that the more niche of a research topic you're talking about, the harder it is to get that funding, because there's also peers who sit on different committees. So like imagine like you're competing for research grants and there's other folks who have competed with you in the past or have whatever achieved sitting on these committees to decide where grants go. And so I'm not trying to paint it as like it's some like it's not a totally broken system, but it is very similar to the way that DeFi compares to traditional finance. You have something that's just much more capital efficient, and it allows you to, in this case, allow anyone to participate in a DAO. So if we're talking about VitaDAO and this new field of decentralized science, the idea that you can easily bring capital together and align people's interests through tokenized systems, that's really compelling. Because like now I would say you are further financializing a really important field of science, which traditionally it's very gated. There's, as you pointed out, universities tend to thrive on the amount of research dollars they can bring in. And a lot of the research that is done, the innovations that come out of that have been like some of the most game-changing parts of our life. Whether it's making use of research that goes into computers back in the day, or modern cell phones. There's a long track record of just how impactful those research dollars can be. So I guess I think what you guys have with VitaDAO, what you've really brought to the forefront is what happens when you remove the permission that must be access to be able to invest in these different fields. What happens when you allow anyone to bring their money together and start to source new research projects that you can invest in, and in this case specifically longevity research. Guys, anything else though historically about funding that you think we should point out? I'm hoping we've painted a fair picture. Again, We're not trying to light the world on fire like it's totally broken, but it is very slow and inefficient compared to the way that VitaDAO is operating.
I think maybe two interesting facts is, on the one is just the time researchers spend on getting grants. So I think it's 70 to 80% of the time they spend on writing grants and applying for getting money basically. And in many for many grants, it takes months till they hear back and a ton of paperwork. And in our case, most of it is basically a written proposal, which can be 1 or 2 pages, and then kind of a Zoom talk literally with the senior kind of researchers evaluating the research, and then some discussions to rephrase it, and then it goes on chain. And in some cases, I think from application to getting funded and going through the whole governance process that people in DeFi know, from a discourse forum post to snapshot, it took in some cases I think 3 to 4 weeks from getting funded, which I think is one game changer, is just being way quicker and way less of a hassle to get the funding. And then also having a really aligned community getting behind the project, wanting to host an interview with the researcher to understand the research versus a state filing the grant somewhere in some department and no one of the public really gets to see or gets behind the research project. So I think it's also powerful to have a community of over 5,000 people now that care about what gets funded and that get engaged on those initiatives.
And by the way, you all have just scratched the surface here with VitaDAO, because VitaDAO, and I'll let you correct me here if this is misframing it, but I throw you under the umbrella of venture DAOs. And so if anyone's familiar with the Lao, Flamingo DAO, the Pleaser DAO, this is a DAO that is focused on, again, investing in longevity research. So it's very possible that in the future, I think we'll actually see labs that are owned by a DAO or operated by a DAO, versus right now, this model to me it's very familiar. It's a model that's thriving within the Web3 space.
Totally. I think the interesting angle is maybe that we're I think trying to be even more than just a venture DAO. So we are also, for example, hosting nonprofit initiatives. For example, we're hosting a Gitcoin quadratic donation round for longevity initiatives that Vitalik matched with almost 500,000, I think. And, and kind of that enabled kind of really also a positive sum support of the ecosystem. So help fundraise on other projects that didn't even have any kind of research or IP path. Or one of the initiatives I had the most fun with was kind of micro grants for people getting started in the field, where basically we also through the Gitcoin round actually got donations 40,000, I think, roughly. And then within 2 or 3 days of applications, funded students, 2 people in the lab, 2 PhDs that were working in the field since 20 years with $500 to $3K, within 2 days, and globally throughout the world through just dispersing USDC, which I think is also a hassle to kick off without cryptos, like global micro fellowships in a sense, that also then bring in back the people in the community. So it's really like, think about more than just like funding like a VC and being a venture DAO. It's really about, and also creating almost like a social DAO in a sense, or like community DAO, where people join to like learn about research, join like for like a journal club, and also to like meet kind of like-minded people that really care about the research side, but also about crypto. So I think it's like, yeah, also one interesting part, like beyond the purely financial side of allocating funding.
Hey, Laurence, can we take a step back then to talk more like operationally about VitaDAO and like what's the day-to-day? So, I mean, first off, where does the money come that is being used to fund? I'll let you guys talk through more of this, some of the examples, but to date, you've funded 10 different projects. My understanding is you've sourced around 200, which we'll talk a little more about the due diligence that has driven that process. But yeah, where does the money come in the treasury to be able to fund?
I'm really proud of the way VitaDAO has launched. Smart contract deployed, born, chooses 10% of its token supply to put it to what's called a Gnosis auction, a fair auction. Everyone bids on buying these tokens, governance tokens that give you a vote in what the organization does. Everyone, including, of course, us or there was no pre-sale. There's no such thing as an investor. And at the end of the auction, everyone got the same price. And after that, there was a vote, of course, to give a budget to working groups, to service providers, and enable us to go and incentivize people to do this work. And yeah, we have these amazing network effects. So in a way, it's just people pulling together their money and then deciding where to allocate it. But unlike a VC fund, which is probably hard to join, you have to apply. You might not be sure if you want to work for someone or work for a VC per se. Also, of course, it specifically in longevity, I think it doesn't really have that much impact. That's why I spent quite a few years just getting to know the industry, and I thought I'm going to be a VC, but it just seemed like there's so many new VC funds all the time in longevity, but so few startups. And so the way VitaDAO is doing, and this is really important because NIH has this subset, NIA, National Institutes of Aging, and it has a lot less research funding than, say, cancer or other areas, which aging is kind of the cause of all of these. But then even there, like 80% or more is Alzheimer's research. You can just call it National Institutes of Alzheimer's now. And then
Right.
Only like 2 or 5% max to the actual biology of aging. The rest is sociological things and research on how to make the elderly more comfortable or things like that, and what benches to put in parks. But so VitaDAO is sort of coming in with this IP NFT to fund things when they're still in an academic lab, usually early stage research, and incubate it to bring it to a stage where it has generated some IP so that a new or a startup can be spun out, and then it's ready for these VCs, angels. It's de-risked enough for them, and partners like Apollo Health Ventures, for example, can then go and do the company building and spin it out, or of course from our community with our huge network effects. We always get entrepreneurs from other fields or biotech operators or programmers or anything just wanting to get involved in this field, because it is still usually dismissed by the incumbents. It's just like Web3 and DeFi. And so, yeah, I think it's really important. It's really powerful the way we do it, especially for sourcing. You don't need anyone to tell you what to do. You just go ahead, talk to people in longevity, go to conferences, read papers, whatever you want to do. Just cold email someone and because you want to help them. And then, of course, you also get maybe $500 or Vita tokens $1,000 worth, for example, of Vita tokens for just recommending a project to us, if it's of course it's relevant and it kind of checks the boxes.
Yeah. So a few other like simple stats to help people understand like the progress you've made. So we mentioned there's 200 projects sourced, 10 projects funded. I'm guessing the 5,000 plus community members is it's a nice looking round number, so that's probably gone up as well. Around $2 million has been deployed. So is that meaning like, is your average check size for projects around 200,000, or can you tell me more about like what's the largest check that you've written so far? Maybe what's the smallest check?
Yeah, our sweet spot is really at the 250K level. We have gone quite up and down. It really depends on a case-by-case basis. We do prioritize applications that have a lower ask, of course.
Yeah.
Like when people are efficient and don't take too much overhead and things like that. I think the smallest might be like 30K. I'm not exactly sure. And I'm only talking about projects that we funded in exchange for IP, or we have also the Vitality Healthspan Foundation, which is sort of related and gets funding from VitaDAO, and then it purchases equity in some companies. So I think the 30K was in a company around there.
Yeah. Guys, what about tell me more about like how deals are actually sourced. I'd love to talk about that, and then more about like the due diligence that actually goes into that.
So we have this bounty, and we hope people kind of go ahead and source for us. But we also, of course, internally use our network and ask everyone and give away these bounties as well.
I would imagine like you're probably turning it into a magnet already for deals.
Yeah,
because
people also apply, of course, just on the website randomly. We don't really know exactly. Actually, we should ask some of them. I'm sure some of them we know, but yeah, I don't know about all of them, how they actually heard about VitaDAO.
How this is a harder one because I'm not familiar with how to compare what stage of funding these projects are in, and like if I were to draw a parallel to like venture and other crypto startups. So I guess I'll just ask: Are you putting checks into projects earlier than what let's say traditional funding?
Definitely, yeah. So we come in even before it's a startup, and even if it's just a project like an idea, but the researcher might have published in that area, maybe basic research. They really understand the mechanism, and so now maybe they want to find a target and then find a drug to match that, and actually have a therapeutic out on the market eventually. That's what we really need to fund, things that can generate IP. Most of the time, they come with plans where probably not going to have valuable IP, but that's where the incubation part comes. So we form these squads and kind of work with the applicants to gather all the information and sort of ask follow-up questions. And then we have sort of independent advisory board, senior advisors or scientific advisors that really are experts in the field, scientifically, but also most of the time also in the IP aspect. And we really give valuable feedback. I've seen things actually be changed a lot and pretty quickly, and really massively improve the R&D plan, so that actually something valuable is actually built, and then at the end of the like when the milestone is reached, we also have investors from other VC funds in the longevity space, because this is a small space and we all know each other, actually review these deals. So we know that they would be willing to invest if the experiment is successful. And of course, we design them in such a way that it's quite de-risked.
What would you say is the average timeline to cut a check and fund a project? Let's say someone fills out the form on the website. What's the average time to cut them a check?
Between us and the researcher is not that much. It really depends on the project. Sometimes we might incubate it for longer, but Unfortunately, the timeline can be a few months, like 3 or 4, because we do have to work with the TTO, the Technology Transfer Office in the university most of the time. And they just don't have any incentive, going back to the inefficiencies, to move fast. They can take their time. They lose nothing. They have no reason to hurry.
Yeah. So
Gotcha. Oh yeah, go ahead, Vincent. Sorry.
On the one quickest deal, we actually had like an extremely progressive tech transfer office. It was like extremely eager to move this ahead quickly. I think usually they're more like bureaucratic and slow moving. So I think we, in the best case, can fund something like 3 to 4 weeks, which we did on the second project. But I think usually kind of like it's held back by the university, really like straining the negotiations on the licensing of the research for a long time. But of course, there's also ways to like put pressure onto them and give them deadlines. So, but it's more like on the tech transfer office and the university to take longer than on us. Like we basically, like, if we're like decently convinced by the proposal and have reformulated, which cannot take a week or two, like put it on chain in our governance forum and then make an on-chain like snapshot vote. So that takes like 1 week of like governance discussion and then 1 week of like on-chain voting. So that's like 2 weeks. And then of course before that there's like 1 or 2 weeks of like evaluating and writing up a proposal.
But luckily, we're working on disrupting that. So we have multiple ways of working with researchers. So that's like the sponsor research agreement as a default. But then, we're enabling, now working with biotechs as well. We can get a royalty agreement, maybe share some revenue, and they work faster. But also, in general, we can make a consulting agreement and have the researchers with their knowledge, if possible, of course. They get paid as consultants and then used CROs, contract research organizations, and other academic partners to do the research so that the university doesn't actually have any work on actual IP being done at their lab, so they don't have any claim on the IP. It's all kind of outsourced. We're
very cool. All making sense. I've got a few more rapid fire questions for you, just because I know we're going to be running out of time here shortly. Very briefly, what does the application process look like? How does it work?
For the researcher or for becoming a member broadly?
For the researcher. Yeah. For the deals that you end up funding.
Sure. Yeah, maybe Laurence can take this.
Yeah, just we have this button on the website, apply for funding. Also, we have the sort of the sourcing bounty. It's on our Twitter, and probably gonna have it.
What is that bounty? Like, how much is that worth?
$500, or now it's like $1,000 in Vita tokens, and I think it ends on May 24th. So you have another 14 days, and then we might change it. Yeah.
So
yes, everyone could suggest a project and claim basically tokens for suggesting it.
And that's a great way of getting involved in VitaDAO too, because it shows that you actually are resourceful and can get stuff done. Most people come and join and ask how they can contribute, and we tell them that, and then it is hard, but even if you just even if you're not successful there and show that you really care and you want to get it done, I think that's a good signal. And then more for the shepherding part, we call it, kind of it does require more involvement from the existing members to kind of get involved in putting that deal together and doing all the necessary steps to move it forward towards negotiation and funding.
So for these early stage pre-patent projects, which I think that probably describes all that you funded so far, who owns the IP? Who will own the IP with VitaDAO funding them?
So usually, especially with American universities, they have to have ownership of the IP, but then the new code that gets spun out gets an exclusive license. So we negotiate that license agreement, and we pre-negotiate the terms of how that is going to look like. And having an exclusive license over a piece of IP is like quasi-owning it, because yes, you can do whatever you want, build that product, get all of the value out of it. But of course, because you're licensing it from the university usually, or from some IP holding company, then you give royalties back. And of course, if you don't really do a good job, they can claw it back from you. That's why it's important to kind of hold the ownership in a separate entity. But sometimes, a lot of times, we actually do get ownership with the first project and a few others. We definitely have the ownership, I think, by the service provider molecule, which then sublicenses to the IP NFT owner, and sort of it's like in that legal contract it is referenced. Okay, this address on the blockchain, and then the NFT, of course, can hold research data encrypted, but also the legal contract. So kind of uniting the two. So therefore allowing a DAO treasury to hold real world IP rights, legal rights.
No. Yeah. And thank you. That was, I think you gave a really nice, clean, simple answer to really a very complicated question. And that's part of what interested me and what you're all doing with VitaDAO. I think you're on the bleeding edge of another sort of Web3 use case. And it just makes a lot of sense to a lot of really smart people. We probably should highlight some of the contributors you've attracted and some of the investors. Actually, do you want to rattle off some of the like high profile folks that work with VitaDAO?
Yeah. I think like one of the interesting things is like you can see it also on the website on the community is just like I was surprised by like how many amazing like people from the crypto space or like also early Ethereum space are kind of like really supportive, but then also how like the most like experienced longevity people come into this organization. So like people who are like running R&D for like billion-dollar biotechs for years, joining our like senior reviewer calls, not even asking for like compensation, just like almost like out of curiosity, as well as like a range also of like junior and senior researchers. And I think more in the crypto space, it has been amazing to see like kind of like my like biggest heroes, like from like the Vitalik Spalagis to Brian Armstrong from Coinbase, like enthusiastically like mentioning us and tweeting about us, joining us for conversations before we even started in Vitalik's case, which was amazing to see. But then there's also a bunch of like interesting research just getting really involved. And then like just like well-known faces from the crypto ecosystem supporting us, like Stefan, the co-founder of Gnosis, for example, is like a big supporter, and like a bunch of people that like I don't know if all of them I want to be mentioned.
Yeah, sorry, by the way, you just mentioned that was Stefan from Gnosis, right?
Yeah, the CTO and co-founder has been really supportive. Like he also backed like alongside Vitalik and us the Gitcoin round, and then there's like even like back to like Ethereum, like some of the biggest Ethereum crowd sale buyers are also like enthusiastic supporters that are just like extremely also like just like supportive in the background without making like a lot of noise.
You've definitely tapped into something that people really feel is impactful. You know, this is something that I think a lot of the folks you mentioned, there's quite a few there who probably have more than enough money to live off of for many, many lifetimes. And I think this is one of the reasons we've all admired the likes of Vitalik and Balaji and Brian Armstrong too. I'm a big fan of just who he is and what he stands for. So it's really cool to see that. I know they've all been very intentional about wanting to find ways to give back, and this is, to me, this is one way to actually do it. And forgive me, I should know this already. I failed to do research on the Vita token itself, but I've understood it to be a governance token as of today. Like I would use it to vote on whether or not to fund a project. But am I missing any other aspects of the tokenomics or anything else that you think is worth highlighting around the tokenomics of Vita?
Yeah, I think like that's the main one. I think, of course, it's also like due to like regulatory unclarity that like a lot of projects are governance tokens, and purely focus on the governance part. And I think the interesting thing is, of course, like ultimately we want also to even beyond the regulatory to really be like extremely long-term oriented, and instead of like paying back any investors in 5 years to have like those people that contributed to the DAO to basically like reinvest, like if we would like ever sell any IP or license it, to reinvest into funding more research, and of course also in a sense like enabling like the token holders, for example, like early access or early insights into the research, which I think is also really interesting for many people. So it's, I think, like also for a lot of people, like talking to also friends that supported it with like big amounts that were early in crypto, like they see it more like really as a donation and to become part of like a science community. But of course it's a liquid donation, so they can get out of their donation other than like it's very different, I think, which I think is interesting for people to like contribute money to a DAO that is really active and has also like a community that cares for the topic, involves them into these discussions, versus just like wiring your money to a university and never hearing back from them. Like I think it's a much more engaging and natural way, I think, for crypto people to support science. So yeah, I was blown away also by some of the people, I think, like they put in like big amounts, would never have like funded research directly before because they didn't have access to do so, or the scientific knowledge. So they were lacking in that sense the longevity working group that we built up to help inform like which research actually makes sense to fund.
Guys,
and also I think there's a
I'm sorry, Laurence, just quick question. How much money is in the treasury?
I think Vincent, the tokenomics
I think he froze there. Oh, there we go. Now he's back. Oh, Vincent, you were in a pretty funny position there. Hold on. Go ahead. Start over. Yeah. How much money is in the treasury?
So like we raised the full treasury in Ethereum. So I think we raised somewhat over 2,000 Ethereum, if I'm correct. And then of course allocated some of it to funding research. So I think like I'm denominating it in the ETH for simplicity. I think so. It's like somewhat like probably approximately like 1,500 ETH or something. So like of course depending on the ETH price, we also have like some stable coins, but ultimately we also like get contributions in USDC, but like the initial Ethereum contributions are still in ETH. So it's of course somewhat fluctuating. But then of course we also like fundraise more. So it's like the idea is to just like have continuous contributions. But of course, like Laurence said, like really with the ethos to start with this, like eventually there are really like contributions by the community that made all the decisions. Like literally, like I put in my own money in the Genesis sale, received 0 tokens in the initial Genesis, and then the governance basically decides, okay, those core people to like there was a governance proposal, but people could have voted no on any of it or like discussed it, and so it's like I think a really like fair launch and like was just like completely 100% governed by the people contributing the capital, which I think is powerful. Yeah.
I think last that I looked, it was like 7 million, considering with all the IP NFTs. So if you assume that everything we funded is at the same sort of value, then it would be that. But of course, one of
a bit
these
less
could
by
be
now.
Something that hits 7 billion people and could be billions or trillions of dollars, right? So actually having a vote and governing what we do with that, I think people find that valuable, and I think they will even more. And also all kinds of other potential things that we might do, like early access to certain trials, or if we can, or these IP NFTs, really interesting, where we had this framework on our blog published of fractionalizing them, and so that might be a huge benefit to and unique sort of access to the ones that are holding the tokens, to have these friends, to become friends of the specific research projects, whichever they might want to help govern with us.
Yeah, and I think like we have the ENS VitaDAO.eth, so you could literally go to Etherscan, type in VitaDAO.eth, and you see the treasury. But we also have like
except
liquidity
the IP NFT value, except right there, exactly. That's not value there and there.
So, but then also we're like doing like even looking into like we're like recently teamed up with Prime DAO and did like a token swap. Now there's like a proposal with Bankless DAO, and we're like planning to do a proposal with Gitcoin and with Gnosis. So we're also like just like joining other projects, and which is also really fun and powerful. It's almost like these like DAO relations emerging with other projects. And now like Prime DAO that is doing cool projects really is building for our use case and takes our like things in like our user feedback in a sense into account, and we're like economically aligned because we like swapped our tokens. And similarly for Balancer and a bunch of other projects, we're like fairly active also like like collaborating with other projects that share the excitement, like also Bankless DAO recently.
So cool. It's just so cool. I can briefly describe that. Like when I was in grad school, I mean, most of our time was, like most of our work day was, like a very old school sort of office. You worked in a lab, and you would, you have meetings in person because your whole team works out of that lab. So this is a very traditionally research, at least, is it's like an office job. You work out of a very like um, tight sort of workplace, and you're limited in terms of being able to collaborate with people across the world. And so, not to compare apples with oranges here, like, again, I think you guys operate more like a venture DAO, and I'm thinking more about like, what's it going to mean when all parts of sciences are able to take advantage of aligning everyone's incentives through tokenized systems. And it's a system too that relies very much on the universities. All of the research too that gets published, I mean, it's just insane, like the way they have to pay for these subscriptions. And thankfully it's all moved online now, but like even many years ago, we were still having to access like printed versions of certain like journals, chemistry journals, bio journals, and so on. So anyways, long story short, like you've really identified a very important part of society that it was just like very ready to be disrupted by Web3. So, and I just threw a bunch of buzzwords in there, but it's just like, it's such a like neat fit that you guys have, you and VitaDAO have identified. One last thing I want to end on then is really just about like how anyone can get involved. I do want to clarify for anyone watching this too. We're recording again on May 10th, 2022. This isn't a recommendation or endorsement to buy the Vita token. I am just very genuinely curious about decentralized science. I personally don't own the Vita token, but I've been drawn to VitaDAO because of some common connections, and just been really impressed by the team, because I think you guys have been really like, you've become more of a household brand name in this like emerging space. So anyways, Vincent, Laurence, how should people get involved?
Yeah, I think there are two different ways. I think the easiest, and I think most projects on DAOs, is literally to join the Discord, introducing themselves, and then like Laurence said, like recommending projects, and getting involved on like writing an article or like supporting on specific aspects. So we're always always looking for like devs, for designers, for especially like researchers, etc. But like literally everyone one could imagine. I think maybe two like I think also puzzle pieces or shout outs I want to give is, on the one side, with like the IP NFT that we really would like, which Molecule is building, where I'm also involved, really trying to build like a new Lego block for DeFi to like enable research funding beyond longevity, to have like this on-chain, almost like an ERC20 like token standard for funding research, putting it into like fractionalized ownership structures, like fractionalizing it. Like you can literally create a rare fuse pool around like an IP NFT. Like all those like NFT financializations are also possible with an IP NFT. And then the other is actually like one project that got spin out of VitaDAO is LabDAO, which actually is building also as a DAO, kind of like the laboratory infrastructure on the bioinformatics side, as well as like the literally wet lab execution side, that literally people could go end to end from discovering an interesting molecule to doing the experiments fully from their command line behind their computer, also through crypto incentives, like literally getting funding on Molecule and doing the research on LabDAO. And basically, like that's like our vision is to also like move beyond kind of like the purely physical, like pipetting and manual labor of research, and really like move it to the digital age. Like as an ecosystem, I think a lot of those things are also, of course, experiments. Some of them might work better than others. And I think with VitaDAO itself, we really try to be like, be a heavy adopter of these experiments, like to collaborate with a Gitcoin, to try out what LabDAO is doing, and to just see like what could like a radically different path look like, and to create almost these case studies of like how could one like end to end do research differently. But
And thank you, by the way, DeFi Dad. If you're impressed with us, really impressed with some of the other team members, like my co-steward Tim Peterson and Sebastian Brunemeyer and Professor. So yeah, Tim Peterson is an assistant professor at WashU, for example. But we also have other sort of senior reviewers that are specifically focusing on the reviews, like David Wilson or even Morten Schabai-Knudsen, the PI of the first project we funded, and hopefully, with all when we fund a project, then we involve the person that gets funded to review further projects, and we get these network effects. But also, Kat and Ines and Tyler and Alex and so many other team members that you guys should meet. And I think this is relevant. I'm super glad we talk on this channel, because usually DeFi thinks, what do I have to do with the real world? Or I think it's really important once it's going to really help DeFi, because the skeptics are looking at it and thinking, well, yeah, they're kind of innovating, but kind of playing within their own bubble there with the sort of like computer stuff.
That's why I love this.
But then if DeSci takes off, right, or when it takes off with the real interaction with the real world, they might think, so DeFi is also going to revolutionize the financial system. It just seems like it's just everything is more down to earth.
Yeah. I think that VitaDAO also could be put under this umbrella of Moonshot DAOs. So like one that got a lot of headlines in the past year was Constitution DAO. It was just such a crazy thing because they raised like $40 million in 2 weeks and almost bought a copy of the Constitution. Didn't work out as planned, but it's really cool. Then there's Kraus DAO, which wants to own an NBA team or own at least a controlling share of an NBA team. And that's really cool. Again, like total fantasy to be able to own a tokenized piece of a professional sports team. But then this, to me, sits within that same sort of like crazy moonshot idea using a DAO. But it actually is addressing a very urgent need where there's researchers who are fighting for research dollars. And I don't think, as pessimistic as I've been at times about regulators, especially within the US with DeFi, this to me is like another example of like, this is what happens when you adopt digitally native finance and you stop worrying so much about all the controls, which, I would argue have mostly failed in the legacy world, given the fact that money is constantly being laundered by banks and criminals love to use fiat. So anyways, long story short, it's just so cool what you guys are working on. And I hope this is the first of like many conversations we have. And then reminder to everybody, they can learn more here at VitaDAO.com. Follow VitaDAO on Twitter. Guys, just thanks so much for your time. I'm going to end the broadcast here in a sec. And if you enjoyed this, you can subscribe at DeFiDad.com if you want to hear more interviews with brilliant folks like Laurence and Vincent. And I'm sorry, Vincent, what were you saying?
No, thanks a ton for having us.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks so much for your time. Everyone, have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Bye.